guys, welcome back to 155 Books. My name is Shannon and today I've got a book review of If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This was the pick for October for mine and Shah's book club, which is called the Dog-Eared Book Club. I'm going to leave a link to our Twitter down below if you want to go and check that out. This was not the book for October, this was the book for September because we were a bit behind and didn't actually read this in September, but hey ho. Never mind. And I finished reading this and absolutely loved it, and I knew I wanted to do a full book review video on this book, telling you guys everything that I loved about it. This is going to be a non-spoiler book review, so don't worry if you haven't read this and you don't want to be spoiled for it, because I'm not going to talk about plot points that will spoil this book for you, but I will obviously be talking sort of in depth about the characters, the plot, the writing, the storyline, those kind of things. So if you don't really want to know much about this, then maybe don't watch this, but if you're interested and you want to hear my thoughts, then stick around. So this book follows a main character named Oliver, who has just been released from prison after serving a 10-year sentence for a murder he may or may not have committed. And the detective that put Oliver away now wants to find out what really happened back then and whether he did it or not. The majority of this book then is set sort of back in time, and it follows Oliver when he was at university studying drama at an arts university and his group of friends also studying the same subject. And it follows the series of events that led up to Oliver being arrested for this murder. So I've got my very cute notebook that I took notes in about different sections of the book, and I'm going to just go through some of the things I loved about it in three main sections: the characters, the storyline, and the writing. So to kick off with the characters. So the storyline of If We Were Villains follows a group of drama students that are all friends, and it kind of follows the ups and downs of this group of friends. What is also interesting is that you see the ups and downs of sort of each character throughout the change in dynamic of their friendship when certain things happen, and that's one of the things I loved about this book. So there were some characters that obviously stood out more than others because altogether in the group there are 7 friends, and 7 characters is quite a lot of people to sort of follow throughout an entire book. So then that does mean that some characters didn't have an overwhelming sort of personality that I felt were a bit lacking, and that was Alexander and Philippa, but maybe that was just because their personalities weren't that out there, or because they didn't really play that bigger role in the ups and downs throughout the book. But you know, I enjoyed the friendship dynamic enough that it didn't really bother me that these 2 people weren't in like the forefront of the story. It also definitely resonated with me that it is something that happens in a university setting with a group of friends that are on one course together, as I studied archaeology and we were all really close in my year, and there were a big group of us, and certain things do sort of happen when you're all studying the same thing, you're all living together, you're all really close friends, but thankfully at the end you still talk to one another and everything like that. So despite it being a very different and weird kind of storyline, I definitely could see how these things would happen. So moving on to the storyline itself, I found the plot itself very fast-paced and massively gripping. It's probably the most gripping book I've read all year, and I couldn't stop thinking about it when I wasn't reading it, and yeah, it was just very gripping. I also really like that it basically follows a whole academic year, because the story follows them in their 3rd year. So you see them perform their first play, and then it's Christmas, and then they come back and they've got exams, and then it's Easter. So you see like the holidays and sort of their assignments and all of that stuff, and how that comes into play in the storyline too. And it also reminded me how much I love books that are set in like a university setting. I always forget this, and then I read a book that's set in a university setting and I'm like, this is so good, why don't I read more? Despite the plot being gripping and well paced, I did kind of guess a couple of things and where it was going. So one of the main things that happens, I saw that happening. The second main thing that I kind of saw happening, I saw that happening. And the ending, I kind of guessed. But despite the fact that I had guessed what was going to happen, it was still kind of a shock to me because of the way it was written. And as I've already mentioned, the ending. If you follow me on Twitter, then you will know that I tweeted when I finished this book that I wanted to throw it at the wall when I finished it because of the last sentence, because it was that good. And I'm definitely one of those people that the ending of a book means a lot to me, so it can totally change my star rating. It can make it a 5-star book or like a 2-star book if the ending is good or bad. And the last thing I want to talk about is the writing. I will be completely honest and say that the writing in this book was not out of this world amazing, the most poetic, beautiful writing I've ever read. Not at all. It was simple, and I think that's one of the reasons why I loved it so much. It was easy to read. I also enjoyed that the writing was set out in sort of parts, sort of like a play would be, which was very clever, and I've only just realised that now. So it was like part 1, part 2, part 3, which is like a lot of the Shakespeare plays that are mentioned in the book. That leads me on to my next point. One of my favourite things about this book was the fact that it had bits of Shakespeare's plays in it, because the students or the characters were performing the Shakespeare plays, incorporated it sort of into the writing. So they were performing the play and you'd be reading the play, and there'd be drama in the play and drama in like the book, and it was just so good. It definitely worked for a lot of the plot points in this book as well. A lot of the really gripping things and like shocking things that happen while they are performing plays, which I thought was very clever. And the book does also flash backwards and forwards, but only at the beginning of every part. So at the beginning of every part there is a epilogue, and the epilogue is Oliver talking to the detective in the present time, and then when it goes to chapter 1, then it flashes back. But that's the only time you get the flash forward to the present, is in the epilogue of every single part of the book. And for me that worked really well, because it meant there wasn't loads of flashing backwards and forwards, and the majority of it happened in the past, and I enjoyed that more than the present day bits, so I was happy that there wasn't a lot of the present day. Again, something that worked really well, I thought. And that sums up all of my thoughts on this book and all of the things I loved about it. But the reason why I loved this book so much and I gave it 5 stars was because this book was my kind of book. It had the simplicity of the writing and the inclusion of Shakespeare's plays. It had drama, it had a really interesting friendship group and weird friendship dynamics, and yeah, it was just my kind of book. And especially the ending, because the ending was so good, that just tied it all up for me, and I was like, yes, this was my kind of book. Absolutely adored it, gave it 5 stars, and would definitely recommend it to people who want something maybe a bit different to read. So that was my non-spoiler book review for If We Were Villains. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read this book and what your thoughts on it were, because I can kind of understand why some people might give it 3 or 4 stars. Just the whole package of it for me made it a 5-star book.